Madam Clerk, roll call please.
President Herron,
Here.
Vice President Norris,
Here.
Secretary Harvey,
Here.
Commissioner Carter,
Here.
and Commissioner Spikers.
Excuse.
Thank you.
This is Public Hospital District Number 4, King County. I guess I should say it first. Sorry about that. Board of Commissioners Work Study. It's Wednesday, February 26, 2020, 6:30 p.m. Snoqualmie Valley Hospital North-South Conference Room, Snoqualmie, Washington. I'd like an approval for the agenda.
Move.
I'll second it. Okay, so move. Our topics of discussion, I don't need to make a, we need vote. Okay, got a first, got a second. All those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Topics of discussion for this evening. The first one would be review public facing policies by Dr. Whitcup. Second would be the finance education by our CFO Patrick. And the third is check-in regarding continuing Robert's Rules Education Series. And then fourth, if we have time, EHM 2019 Annual Report from Dr. Whitcup. Dr. Whitcup, please.
What I wanted to do is just take the opportunity to show you all the public-facing policies of the organization. And I'm doing it by showing you what publicly faces. All right, so they are on our website. So that's what I pulled up here for you is our website. Let me.
I pull it up all the time.
Our website? You do?
I
Okay.
do. Read the
Good.
stuff.
So they're in the public information section. Just where they're located. And what I'll do, I'll go backwards just a little bit so you can see where I went. So it's here in the, I'll go all the way. Popular. So if you, when you come to the home screen, you just hit the governance page. There we go. And then right here is public information. So when you click that, it pops up the policies. And these are public-facing policies that we, number one, feel like are important. And some of them, there actually is an obligation for us to have them publicly facing and on display. And so again, I didn't print them out to put them in your hands because they're always
Yeah.
available to you right here.
That's fine.
But these policies, so one of them is an admission policy. And let me just grab them for you. And so in this admission policy, what it's really saying is the things that you would expect it to say, that our admission to the hospital is not restricted by anything, gender, orientation, national origin, ability to pay, ancestry, all of those things that we need to say. And then it starts to describe the process of admission. So again, this is probably more detail than most people put on their public site. That most people will tend to stop up here just saying that we don't discriminate, but we go ahead and put a little more detail and some more policy. This is actually the policy that lives inside our system as well. The next policy is a non-discrimination policy. Again, exactly what you would think that it's going to say, and that is that we don't exclude, we don't deny benefits, and we don't discriminate on the basis of any of the discriminatory practices standards. And we reference all of the appropriate guidelines and WACs, both federal and state, in there. And then we also have an opportunity to talk about our grievance policy, so that if anybody has a grievance to bring, here's the process for doing it. So we've included that with our non-discrimination. You can stop me anytime. I mostly want you to know the general content.
I just have a question. Are our nurses a part of a union?
No.
Oh, okay, so the grievance, the grievance just for our.
Yeah, just for
Okay.
anyone
Thank you.
who's a participant. an end-of-life care policy. That up here. So we have again, a fairly extensive end-of-life care policy, and we've placed it here for everybody to see, and even though it's something that we use internally. And so again, the things for you all to know about this is that we do participate in end-of-life care. We always prioritize comfort. Comfort's always a patient priority, but it is especially a priority when it comes to providing end-of-life care. And again, the piece for you all to know is that we do not participate in physician-assisted suicide. And so many years ago, when I-1000 came about, this board, it was a different constituents, Kevin was on it, but different people in the seats, but the board did pass a resolution that we would not, our organization would not be a participant in physician-assisted suicide.
Now, how do you define physician-assisted suicide?
Oh, it isn't in quotes actually, it is very defined in the state. So I-1000 is absolutely defined of what physician-assisted suicide means and what the process is if someone wanted to participate in that. And so our process is we will connect you. If that is a deeply held belief and conviction that they want to understand and go further down that path, that we have referrals or that we can make to them. But we aren't participants at any of our buildings and none of our providers, so none of our prescribers.
So how would you define physician-assisted suicide?
So this is physician-assisted suicide is when the prescriber actually prescribes medications that are for the intention of ending life, that will be self-administered by the recipient.
Oh, okay. As opposed to euthanasia, it's different.
It's the same. They're two words for the same thing, as opposed to euthanasia, you would be the one who administers, versus they self-administer and they're physician-assisted. Yeah. But the outcome's kind of the same. Yeah.
So it's legal in Washington State.
It is legal.
Why did the board vote that way then?
That was a board vote.
Personal
So
beliefs.
recalling it really was a reputation that we didn't want to have at that moment. Kevin, you could probably speak as you were someone who cast a vote.
I don't think we want to fight the controversy, the potential controversy.
Yeah.
Is it still controversial?
It is, yes, yes.
Can be.
I'm asking Dr. Whitcup. Excuse me. Is it still considered controversial?
I think it depends on the circle that you're in. So you'll find that there's quite a large representation who have developed quite a comfort level with the concept. I think the comfort level has actually emerged out of the fact that a huge percentage of people who go down that path exploring physician-assisted suicide never actually take advantage of it. What they discover is their symptoms were so poorly managed that they were feeling desperate. And as they head down the path exploring physician-assisted suicide, what they do is encounter folks who are highly expert at actually managing their symptoms and are able to actually find them a relief from what was motivating them to head down the path in the first place. And so there's truly a very small proportion of folks who actually do participate in the physician-assisted suicide route. So I think in the end, what this has resulted in is globally a better job managing symptoms. Even in scenarios where somebody says, I won't be a participant, but the standard of care has changed as a result of it.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I can give you just a little bit of statutory background. It came about in 2008, came effective in March of 2009, and it's called the Death with Dignity Act in the state of Washington. Legislature approved it. You must be a resident of the state, so you just can't move here and have. People were doing that in California, though, and I think Oregon. So people that lived in Washington, in order to participate in that, they would go down to Oregon. But then the legislature passed it here. It's a fairly complicated process, though. I've had several clients come to me and say, Skip, how do you do that? So you have to go get these forms to fill out from the Department of Health. They have to submit them. It has to be within a identified 6 months of your remaining life, as identified by a physician. The physician has to fill out all these documents, send them back to the Department of Health, and then they prescribe a lethal dose, I guess that's how you say it, lethal dose of medications. So it was and I just remember when it came about in 2008, there were a lot of advocates for it. There were a lot of people that went up to the Hill and said,
Yeah, I remember
I
that.
want to die with dignity, I do not want to have this or that, or I don't want to have to go to Oregon so I can participate. And there are a number of hospitals that have chosen not to, as Commissioner Hadley is aware of, and others for certain reasons. And I don't know the referral process, but I'm pleased to hear that, because I'll send people sometimes to go see doctors now, and come back, well, that doctor doesn't do that. I said, okay, well then, I'll start sending them here to Snoqualmie Valley to get referrals.
Well, here, we even included it here, and the Hemlock Society is a great
Oh,
resource.
yeah.
So that's who we tend to use, because they stay very up to date, because participants will tend to enter and exit the arena, and the Hemlock Society tends to stay very informed of who's current participant. And again, when that is the circumstance that you're in, the last thing you want is to have to be kind of seeking and getting that rent.
Yeah. I remember joining a group called Compassion with Care during that time from our archdiocese, so we all went to Olympia. Really love it too, for that particular topic, issue. Yeah.
Do we have many patients that are here at the time of passing?
Who die here in the hospital?
Correct.
Other than
Is
passing
that-
up the initiative for the.
No, do they die here in the hospital,
Hospital.
right? That's your
Correct.
question?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not talking about acute, I'm talking more chronic, someone that is obviously ailing and is likely to pass in 2 or 3 days type deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, no, it's not the majority of our patients, but it's not unheard of at all.
It does happen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that said, has anyone ever attended, viewed, toured the Provident Colby campus, the top floor? They have oh my Lord, it's an amazing facility. I lost my dad 2 years ago, and as we went through his last days, they asked if we would like him to be moved up to this floor for his last time. And-
Providence in Seattle, what's Seattle?
No, it's in Everett, on the
Oh, in
Colby
Everett.
campus.
Okay.
And it is, when you walk in, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. It's like you're walking into a Hilton, a Hyatt. It's Four Seasons. It's unbelievable. The elevator door opens and you don't even know you're in a hospital. It is, you smell fresh cooked cookies, fresh baked cookies, and the furnishings and everything is real high end. And you go into this suite where the patients are kept in their individual rooms that are large, so you can have all family around. And I didn't know if it was part of our makeup, of our mix of patients that we see or care for, but it was a sense of, I know my siblings and our spouses will never forget that experience.
So, all the concepts that you just described is something that we try and accomplish here for the families who we know that death is imminent. And in somebody who's on a declining path, but not rapidly declining, we actually would go ahead and transition them to someplace else. But if it's imminent, within the next really day or so, we don't make a transition. We let them and their families stay here. But do try and create that environment that really is just a highly supportive environment. But we don't have any place to move higher than the second floor.
Right.
Well,
it was
high as
like-
it goes.
it's like
But
you-
what's your
what's
experience at so Prov Everett, they have their former chief medical officer, who's now in a different role, is the state leader in regard of hospice and palliative care. So Joan Robertson's her name. And so that what you experienced is her, that's her, everywhere that you see at that building, that's that facility. Yeah, and that's their hospice and palliative care floor. And they'll do a lot of relocations there. Yeah, they do. They do really, really, really solid work. Yeah.
Do our patients have POLSC?
Absolutely.
All of them? Oh, okay. Yeah,
Absolutely.
sometimes,
Mhm.
I don't think they, yeah, okay.
Yep, absolutely. That's a standard.
Yeah.
It's a state standard.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is why I wanted to do this, so you guys would see what was out there for patients to see, because they're likely to ask you questions about it, so
Yeah.
kind of hit the highlights. And then there's a reproductive health policy. You see there's 2 entries here on the form. So this one, and I'll open it, is our policy. And I'm not going to open this one, but this is a form that the Department of Health asked everyone to post. And the reason they did this just this last year is there was, again, a lot of push, especially in public hospital districts, to delineate what your reproductive health services were and what your role was in them. And so WISHA and the Department of Health joined together and said, you know what, why don't we all at least have a consistent display? Because the inconsistency of the displays was creating opportunity for those who were kind of keeping the pot stirred. That was just kind of it was contributing to the pot stirring on them. So our reproductive it says everything that's on the form, that really all that we do is we participate in emergency deliveries, but we are not OB. We participate in emergency contraception, but we do not do anything beyond that. In our clinics, we prescribe birth control, but
Nothing.
otherwise we do not do any termination services, and we do not do any planned deliveries, because those who are really adamant about making sure that you have broad perspective on reproductive rights are really adamant that if you provide delivery services, you need to provide termination services equally, with equal access.
Okay.
And so this is, because we don't provide the deliveries, and we also don't have an obligation in some interpretations to do terminations. So, if you recall, this was the position around which we discontinued our OB clinic, was because we were concerned how we would be perceived in regard to the reproductive services program or interpretations.
Makes sense.
And then the last is the financial assistance policy. And this is, the policy itself is a reproduction of what the patient will see, so that they can, right up front, they can see what it will look like if they wanted to apply for financial assistance. And so we call it, charity care procedures. There's a lot of names. We try and use them all in here. But that if somebody can't pay, that we will still care for you, and we will have different ways of assisting in providing your care. All the different ways that you can apply, how we can assist with translation services, on and on. So again, you guys are likely to get asked these kind of questions.
But our
too.
hospital do have insurance for individuals that would like to purchase insurance.
We don't provide insurance.
What is
We
it?
have affordable access, which is prepaid care
Right.
in our clinics only.
Oh, clinics only, because
Clinics
today
only.
at my exercise class, that was one of these things that they were discussing. There was a hospital, there's a clinic somewhere in Bellevue that offers something that if you don't have any insurance and you become a member of this, you can go there for your annual exams, but you have to pay a monthly membership or something like that. So is that
They were
something-
probably talking about us.
Hmm.
$35 a month.
Is that what it is?
$40 a month.
And then there's also an outpatient clinic. This lady was telling me that
It was.
when you are a member, there is like,
I don't know about
it's
that.
almost like a Star Trek. You go in, they take all your body mass index, your weight, your blood pressure in Bellevue. I just couldn't remember the name of it.
There's one of those in
Do you know?
Snoqualmie. There's two
Oh.
of those in Snoqualmie.
Where you just walk in there and they'll take all your
They
vital
walk in
statistics.
and they take your blood pressure and your height and your
Yeah,
weight and your
yeah.
BMI. And
Oh.
those are our clinics.
Yeah, I know. She was talking about the one in Bellevue, so I've never.
I don't know. That's actually the same, that's exactly what our patients get who come into our clinics.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay,
Yep,
and
yeah, all of
people are
that.
saying it's almost a reminder of Star Trek. You go in there, they scan the
Oh,
whole
I don't think they would think it was just Star Trek, but.
Anyway, that was just a comment they made.
Very
Okay.
good. But anyway, so here is this. So again, if you are
That's
interested at all,
$35 for affordable.
it's $40 a month for
$40.
affordable access. And
Affordable
then there's a
access.
copay as you come to each visit, there's a copay.
Okay.
And the amount of the copay depends on whether you're doing primary care or specialty care. Yeah.
Okay.
But that is not in this policy,
Right,
as we're
right.
focusing on policy.
Yes.
This is just about how we manage uncompensated care. Okay?
Dr. Whitcomb, I
Yes, yes.
appreciate your perspective on delivery of this information in the context, and several times you verbalized out in the communities you may be asked as commissioners these questions, and there's a relevance of the information,
Yeah.
practical application of it,
Uh-huh.
so that we don't get caught flat-footed.
Right.
And we also
Yes.
have a common statement.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And I think it's helpful if you say, I don't actually remember the details because I don't live in this every single
Yeah.
day, but I know exactly where to direct them to find the
Yeah.
Thank you.
information.
Okay.
So you just send them right here, again, on our website. Public information is what they're going for.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. When people are talking, I'm just listening, so I'm asking questions.
Mhm.
So thank you for bringing all of this because,
Absolutely.
you know.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Patrick because he is going to wow you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says with confidence. So I'll just do an intro and then I'll pass it over while the slides are coming up. So there are new accounting standards that we get to be obligated to
Yes.
from this year onward.
Yes.
And so I'm not sure that we all feel that we've been invited in.
Yeah.
But we are in nonetheless, and so
Yeah.
Patrick's going to wow you, because there actually are some significant changes, especially from the finance committee perspective.
Yeah. I know when you woke up this morning, you said, I want to learn about GASB. So
Yeah.
here we go, you get to learn about GASB, which is
Okay.
it's the Government Accounting Standards Board.
Uh,
It's an independent organization based in Connecticut that establishes the accounting and financial reporting standards for state and local governments that follow generally accepted accounting principles that we call GAAP. You've probably heard of GAAP before, so this is the general accepted principles. What's not on your slide here is GASB is composed of 7 members with various backgrounds, and they are appointed for 5 years. Up to 10 years they can be appointed to, so they can come on and come off again. And they come from state and local governments, public accounting, academia, user groups. GASB is not a governmental entity. Like it says, it's an independent organization. They received a funding from accounting support fee established under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act and under the Consumer Protection Act, as well as sales of its own products on the GASB website. So that's what funds GASB. How do they set the standards? GASB develops issues and accounting standards through transparent and inclusive process. Well, is it really transparent and inclusive? That's kind of the form that they go through. For instance, one of the rules that we'll talk about later is GASB 84, and they actually started talking about this rule in 2010. And they had deliberations and put it on their agenda, so that was their make an agenda decision. They deliberated starting in September of 2013 for that, and then they review what the deliberations are. They had a preliminary review in November of 2014. They had a comment period between 2014 and 15. Then they went back and did a field test, deliberated again, held public hearings. So finally made the final statement in 2017. So they took 7 years to take a look at all of these standards and went through and made it public education and get input in. So it really is an open and inclusive process, and can take quite a while for them to make those decisions, because they do have major impacts on public entities, governments. So any of your public schools, any of your universities, public hospitals, fire departments, all of them are following GASB standards. So whose interest does GASB protect? They first consider the interests of those who will use the financial statements by the state and local governments, including the citizens, the elected officials, and investors in mutual bonds. They further identify those 3 groups as the elected officials, like I mentioned before. They also take a look at that on the external financial reporting, and have long insisted that an independent auditor vouch for the reliability of those financial reports. So that's why we have an independent auditor every year come in. Moss Adams is our auditor, review all of our financial statements and make sure that we are following, they agree that we are following generally accepted accounting procedures, and they will comment that yes, based on our tests that we've done, that it looks like Snoqualmie Valley Hospital is following that. But the responsibility is ultimately on the governing board to that, and the managers there. So you think it's the accounting firm, but it's actually us at the managerial level and the governors that are ultimately responsible for making sure that. So who oversees GASB? The Financial Accounting Foundation. And they were established in 1972, and that's when they came up with FASB, so, which is the governing board that manages for-profit companies. So for 12 years and going on back, there were no standards for government accounting reporting. That some of them would follow FASB rules, some of them would just do whatever. So for the investors and purchasers of treasury bonds and municipal bonds and things like that, you wouldn't be able to know whether those financial statements were accurate or not. So that's why GASB came about in 1984. The states were proactive with it because they didn't want the federal government coming down on the local governments and saying you have to follow it this way or that way. So that's why GASB came about. And so it's the FAF that apports the Board of Trustees to GASB. So they're the ones who elect the 7 board members of GASB. So what is GASB's mission? It's to establish and improve financial accounting and reporting standards to investors and other financial reports, and educate the stakeholders on how most effectively understand and implement those standards. So they produce the rules, but then they also give comment on how your accountants are supposed to apply that and create your financial statements and follow how you're supposed to report revenues, for instance. You have to follow the accrual accounting method, so that revenues are recognized when they're earned, and expenses are recognized when the liability is incurred, regardless of timing when the cash flow happens. Also for financial reporting, it needs to be relevant, reliable, auditable, comparable, and consistent. So the standards that you follow are the same for year, that's the consistency. Comparable, so that you can pull up Snoqualmie Valley Hospitals and Ferry County Hospital, and you will be looking at similar reports and can see and can compare what are the revenues and that are coming in, and then of course auditable, that they've been verified that they're following GAAP. So there's a couple of recent decisions by GASB. I mentioned the GASB 84 that took 7 years for them to announce. So that goes into effect for 2019. And this is in regards to pensions and other employee benefits. And what it basically says is that we, as a government entity, we have responsibility for the retirement funds of our employees. Even though we don't own those funds, they're not our funds, they're the employees' funds, we say where they go into, and we're responsible for moving those funds into the different choices that the hospital has made for which funds to put them into. So we have a fiduciary responsibility. And we also have to now, what that means is that we have to claim that fiduciary responsibility for any disbursements as a liability. Before, you would never see those responsibilities as part of our financial statements. They will now need to be part of our financial statements. There'll be a separate financial statement that you'll see all the retirement funds that we have on there, and those have to be audited. Another one is GASB 87 was leases. The statement increases the usefulness of government's financial statements by requiring recognition of certain lease assets and liabilities for leases that were classified as operating leases, and they were just expense. So now you have to actually capitalize your leases. And that means you have a new set of assets that you didn't have before and a new set of liabilities that you didn't have before. So what is GASB 87, which is the leases impact on our financial ratios? So our debt to equity ratio will increase because there's more liabilities that we have, but there's no change in owner's equity. We didn't really get any, what's the word that I'm looking for here? There was no increase in net income because of this. Our return on assets will decrease, and that's where you see no additional net income, because net income ultimately goes towards your owner's equity, all the net income that you have. So that's where your debt to equity will increase and your return on assets will decrease. And your working capital ratio will also decrease. But it's across the board for all the entities. So there will be a new leveling of what's normal in your debt covenants going on to the future.
I think that's probably really important as you all start getting, the financial statements through the year, that remember when you look back
Mm-hmm.
in a year prior to this year, they're going to be different, and it shouldn't be alarming to you. It's because of these
Yeah.
changes, and these
Yeah.
are not small numbers.
They're not.
Because these are all of our leases and these are all of our retirement dollars.
Yep.
So they will be dramatic difference, and you might be inclined to just kind of,
What happened?
What has happened?
Yeah.
What was missed before,
Yeah.
and just remember.
Inevitably, we will, and you'll remind us.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll say, oh, this is right. This
Yeah.
is where you see that.
But have you implemented GASB 84 yet?
Yes,
Anything?
we
So the-
have.
The 87 will be this year?
Yeah, it will be 84 you'll see on our audited financial statements when they come out
Okay.
in, because the requirement was anything after July of 2019. And because we follow a calendar year, fiscal year, our December 31st is obviously after July 2019. So therefore, we will have to report GASB 84 on our 2019 audited statements, which means we do have to have, and they're comparative statements, so we actually have to have 2018 and 2019 audited. So there'll be a quite good increase in our auditing expense this year because of that. So, and there's still some guidance that's left to come from GASB on GASB 84, but that's not going to come out until June when we've already had our audited statements, so that's why we have to follow the GASB 84 right now, because otherwise there would be qualified statements from our accounting firm on our statements if we weren't following the GAAP rules as they currently are in place. And then you'd have to explain to all the investors and to you guys, why is there a qualified statement on here? And it's better to just have them audited and take care of that. And most of the other hospitals that I've talked to are going ahead and going forward with the audit on their retirement funds to follow GASB 84. So like I said, the increased liabilities will be the good thing with us because of our revenue bonds and our debt covenants. We do not have to report GASB 84 for our debt covenants. So those won't be affected by that based on our covenants that they're written with our revenue bonds there. So even though the audited statements might show a lower debt to cover ratio, our covenants for the bond holders, and they know this, will reflect the old, and we do not have to update those. So that's a good thing for us, for the revenue bonds, and they show that we have the adequate coverage for that. So, like I said, increased audit costs, and there'll be separate statements, I mentioned that as well. And that's GASB 84, GASB
If I understand
101.
it correctly, did you say we don't need to report the covenant?
We will,
On
not
GASB
on the covenant
84?
statements
On the
to
covenant
the,
statement.
to the revenue bonds, we don't.
We
They
don't.
will be reflected in our audited statements, but on our covenant statements, we will have the covenants covered under the old methodology, because that's what is specifically, we have to follow the covenants, so we keep following them the way that they were written. Exciting stuff, right? And then I have one other slideshow, and I'm sure,
Usually call out the grocery store conversation, when
Yeah.
people ask me questions about gas fee 84 in the grocery store.
yeah, I'm
Throw
sure.
this aisle.
Yeah.
Discuss it.
Well, I bet you this is a real grocery store one, the district taxes. I bet you get pulled aside a lot in asking about taxation. So this is something that we first produced for the Chamber of Commerce event in December. And so it's taking a look at the property values and what our tax rate is and what household's proportion is for their annual tax revenue that comes to the hospital.
What's the date of that information?
That's 2019. So there's almost 11 billion in total property value in the district, and our tax rate is about 37 cents on the dollar. So we get a total tax revenue of approximately $4 million there. So what does that mean for individual households? Well, if you have a high-value home like this gingerbread house here, that's, a mansion with multiple rooms, it's $1 million assessed value. Your annual property taxes for the district is $366 that you're paying for the hospital per household.
But that's just for the hospital, that's not for our fire.
No, that's just your
Yeah,
hospital
that's not
portion.
for- yes,
Yeah,
okay.
that's your
Yeah,
hospital
yeah.
portion. Yep, for our district here.
Do we do projections on anticipated growth?
1% a year.
Always, now that we're able to get,
Mm-hmm.
but is that our actual projection, 1% growth per year, or?
It's
are you
a
speaking for
conservative,
what we're allowed?
yeah, we do it conservatively because we don't know
Right.
what it's gonna be.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a 600,000 assessed value, your annual property taxes for the district is about $220 per household. And then for a modest house at 200,000, it's about $73 for your portion there. So a little cottage there.
Really fixed up.
So what is that, if you have $1 million, what does that 366 per household year provide? 24/7, level 5 trauma ER. We had 4,000 visits last year. You have 17,000 clinic visits, 33,000 inpatient and outpatient rehab procedures, 58,000 lab and imaging services. We turned that 3.9 million into about $38 million in revenue. So they get a good return on there. $3.9 million. Yeah.
So,
And the level of uncompensated, the amount of uncompensated care that we provided last
Yeah.
year was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was about $150,000.
Yeah.
Since we've opened the hospital, it's been over $1 million in uncompensated care that we've provided.
And so many patients, I can't remember the
Yeah,
number. But
yeah.
That's wonderful.
And we've been open for 4 years, 5 years?
Yep,
5 years in May.
5 years in May.
So when I left the board, I want to say our revenue.
Yeah, financials. Some people don't like charity fairs that we.
I want to say our, Patrick, I want to say our revenue was, tax revenue was about 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
So, you go from 2.5 to 3.9 in 4 years, that's a lot more than 1%.
It is a lot more than 1%.
That's because there's lots of vacant land and a lot built in new houses
Yeah.
and new residents.
Yeah.
It's new construction,
Yeah.
New
because you have
construction.
the cap of the 1%.
I understood. Is that by design, the 1%, or is somebody suppressing that projection?
It is because you want to project conservatively. It's what we do for when we're looking at raising revenue bonds or LTGO bonds is they look at it about 1%. Evergreens, same thing, they're at 1%. They just issued $100 million in revenue bonds, and their projected growth, again, is 1%. And then you can add in what you averaged over the past 10 years or so. But conservatively, we would say 1%. And then you can do like a
When you
bottom
come out
line.
with your actual,
When you
it'll
come
be
out with
stronger.
your actual, it'll be stronger, yeah.
Understood.
Exactly. And we do know that there's growth in North Bend and growth, and Snoqualmie's in their final phase, but.
Are there any more questions from the commissioners? Okay. Very good, thank you, Patrick. That's
You're
very
welcome.
helpful, so something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to check in with everyone regarding, and your take on the benefits of continuing our Robert's Rules Education Series for 2020. So I wanted to hear from everyone what your thoughts are. So let me start with Commissioner Parker.
Carter?
I'm sorry, Carter. No wonder, I'm sorry. I was thinking about Tom Parker, Commissioner Carter. Sorry, I apologize. I'm sorry about that. Why did I call you Parker?
My question is, what's the cost?
I come to the meetings, it costs, I usually spend 15 minutes to 20 minutes preparing whatever I'm going to prepare. That's what I think I've been doing the last several months. So whatever the cost is to prepare it, and then I'm already at the meetings, it doesn't cost you anything. If you brought me only for the meeting, then I'd charge you my hourly rate. I think my hourly rate for you folks is $250. That's discounted from $350. My hourly rate's $350, but a discount to $250 for you guys.
I like them. I think it's adds a little bit of levity and a little bit of education. And if it's not, what? And if it's not, prohibitively expensive, I get a kick out of it.
Okay. Very good, thanks for your comments there. How about Commissioner Howley?
Well, I would echo her comments as well. I find it interesting, I think, in the conduct of the meeting in a respectful and appropriate decorum, so it's effective and productive, and a decent meeting. I think it serves a purpose in that context. If there is a perception that that type of conduct is no longer exhibited, I would question, do we still need to do the spend? Although I don't think the spend is exorbitant. And I find it personally interesting, but I think there was a reason for it early on. And if that doesn't exist, then I would have a question mark in that context. That would be my statement.
I guess since,
Oh, go ahead, Rob. I was hoping I could add something later, or now, whenever.
okay, I'll call on you.
Okay.
Commissioner Morris.
I guess I think that it is helpful, and as we didn't have, and we now have guidance on Robert's rules and stuff, we're doing a better job, but it takes practice to get it down. And I think we need more practice as the board changes sometimes. But I think right now, the board we have is willing to learn how to do it right, instead of speaking out of turn, which we've all done, so anyhow, that's kind of my thought. I think it's worth it for us.
I would like to see it continued for 2020. Although most of us sometimes do not really follow the rules, Robert Rules of Order, like you take turns, we become too informal, and I'm not one to, hey, listen. I think we all
We have
need,
the same problem.
we all need to learn, it's your time to be recognized and all that. In a work study, I'd like to see it more informal because we're asking a lot of questions. That's really what the work study is all about. More the opportunity for all of us to be relaxed and to be able to ask questions, without having to be called upon to ask questions. If you have a question in your mind and you want to speak, as long as we don't interrupt this person, that's okay. We are all adults and polite people, we're diplomatic. So I think it's okay on a work study, but on a more regular board meeting, I think certain decorum is important. And I know I'm guilty of not, not calling on people. So anyway, it's a learning experience for all of us. For me especially, I think I see that we have, Commissioner Carter, you're fairly new, and I'm sure you understand about Robert Rules of Order, and I think it's helpful for anyone. I'm always, and the same thing with Commissioner Howard, I think that we can benefit for this continuing education Robert Rules of Order series. So, in that respect, I think we will continue to 2020.
I think Commissioner
Commissioner
Carter.
Carter.
Yes, Commissioner Carter, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, because I think part of what makes it so appealing to us is your delivery is so great. If we run low on Robert's rules, maybe some refreshers on relevant RCWs would be helpful as well.
Yes,
We
definitely.
could do that, the Open Public Meeting Act requirements, email use of public records text requests, we could do that. I think the suggestion of the president and I had is that we've been talking about individual trees instead of the forest. So next month, I will bring you a handout that has the forest. It's a multi-Mylar copy document. You'll go, oh, look at how big the forest is. So we started talking about the trees, but we'll go back and just give you some exposure. And then I'm open to feedback. I've done this for other organizations, and sometimes we role play these things. I don't think you need to do that. You've been doing this long enough. Besides, I don't really like people who do role plays. But let me know what you would like to see, and I've encouraged you to do that before. And there's a topic, and you've done that in the past. I know Commissioner Spiker said, he says, we should talk about this. And I think it was Commissioner Paul says, when do you get to use the gavel? Remember, we did one on when to use the gavel. We looked that one up. So let me know what you'd like to see. But so what we're going to tee up next meeting is the forest instead of just the trees that we've been talking about.
I just want to add another comment. I think your presence in our meetings makes a big difference also to remind us some of the things that we may have skipped in terms of protocols. So I appreciate that.
Well, I think you'll
Thank
be
you.
ready to receive your 4-year degree because we've been doing this almost 3 years now. So at the end of 2020,
We can
we're
get
either going to
parliamentarian.
graduate you and move you on because you'll have completed your 4-year baccalaureate program by then.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. All right, we can move on to,
I think
do we have,
in the
we have
10 minutes.
11
we can
minutes.
do it.
We can- 21 minutes.
So, EHN, we've talked about that, a lot, we reference it, and I thought it might be a good idea just to do a kind of a refresher on what EHN is and why we're involved in it. And then thank you, I've commandeered, I didn't steal, they were given to me, but I've commandeered the slides. We just had our annual EHN provider gathering, we did it at the end of January. And so I thought the slides are really good to give you some insight into what Eastside Health Network is. The very first thing that's up here is in the top right is just a reminder that EHN, that it stands for Eastside Health
Eastside.
Network. And it is a clinically integrated network. And so what it is, almost all of the clinicians that practice on the east side are participants in EHN. So not all, but a huge majority are. And the only thing that brings us all together is that we share the same patients and we share the same intentions. And those intentions are around better care, more cost-efficient care, and better experiences for the clinicians that are participating in this. So otherwise there's only integration around clinical services. So EHN is underwritten by Evergreen and Overlake. They share as equal partners in EHN, so meaning they foot the bills. Is truly what that means, is so they've contributed, I think each of them has contributed close to $1 million to get this up, to get it up and going and continue to sustain it. So some real
Since they are a
investment.
member, do they also request for your feedback or input from you by EHN?
For my feedback?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so EHN is a group of, I think there's 1,800 of us,
Oh.
clinicians that are a part of EHN. So there are 4 hospitals that are part of EHN, Evergreen Overlay, the kind of the core, and then then Monroe, Evergreen Monroe is the 4th
Okay.
hospital.
Which is also a public
So
health.
you must be on the medical staff of one of those 4 hospitals to be in EHN. So that is one of the, and it's through the membership in one of those hospitals that your validity, your standards, the fact that you're going through credentialing actions and background reviews, so that's where the filtering action happens. So that's where you get your quality of providers. If you can't get through a hospital credentialing process, then that you do not gain access to this clinically integrated network. So clinically integrated network is a newer concept. So the Federal Trade Commission has really put some, tried to put some structure around it, but it is still so young that it really hasn't been tested. So everybody's kind of going along together and making sure that we're not violating any of the Federal Trade Commission standards, any of the monopoly standards, and no collusion. And so we have to be a little cautious about what we do share, but because we are a clinically integrated network, we are protected under a quality umbrella. And so we all do share, we aggregate all of our quality information. We do shared savings contracts together, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Kevin, you're looking,
Well, that was
got
my
something?
initial, but I think you touched on one of the considerations of it is when you say FTC, I'm like, what would the Trade Commission be involved in, collusion, et cetera, that type
Yeah.
of context?
And I'm just going to build off of where you are right there. In that, so when we share in contracts together, and the contracts that we share in really are about access to the contracts, because that's access to patients, but we share in the incentive. So each of us that are engaged in a contract may have a different payment arrangement. And so let me just do it for example for you.
Yeah.
A basic visit to the clinic. And it has a number, it goes by 99213. So you don't have to know anything more than that is a descriptor of kind of your basic middle of the road clinic visit. We may have a contract with Aetna, then Aetna will pay us a certain amount for that visit. This clinic B over here has a contract with Aetna, and they'll get paid a different amount for that same clinic visit. We contract differently. In Clinic C down the road, yet another story. What the 3 of us have done is come together as a clinically integrated network and say, we are pooling together. You're going to see us as a single entity when it comes to presenting our quality measures to you. And when we show you that we have great quality, what the agreement that you, Aetna, have with our clinically integrated network is you're going to pay us a little more. you're gonna pay us an extra bonus, an incentive for performing good quality. And if we're really good at negotiating, you're also going to just give us a little extra money up front so that we can do what's called care coordination and do some extra high touch to our patients.
So it's not price fixing.
It is not priced because the price for the visit is not part of this at all. The price for the visit is established on an individual,
Entities.
at the individual entity
How
level.
do you know?
It is the what's on top of that is where we contract with collectively.
So the other, clinic B would disclose how much Aetna is paying?
No,
Well, that's why I wanna know.
Right.
How do you find out
We
whether
there
B
is
and
no-
C have different level of payment?
and you
want to
don't
make sure
need-
you get
you don't
paid.
need, so you don't need to know, and that's
Uh-huh.
what the FTC is interested in. The
Huh.
FTC is very interested that the conversations are not about how much your contract says that you're getting paid for the core visit, but together you can definitely work together and talk about and contract
I see.
together for
For
the
this.
bonus,
Okay.
for the
Is that-
incentive.
Okay, so it's not like a supplement, they call it
Yeah.
a bonus.
Oh, okay.
payment
It's a
or
quality incentive,
Quality incentive.
quality incentive.
And that could be collaborative.
It should be, as a clinically integrated network, it should be collaborative, because that's what you're trying to do is, as a large group of clinicians come together to influence the health of this population that you all serve. And it's the mechanism by which you can all come together and do that, sharing, working around a similar mission, and not have to concede some of the advantages that you have in your ability to contract around your base payment.
So I think it sounds like it's an area that is not very transparent.
It's incredibly transparent, actually.
Mm.
It's incredibly transparent in all of the things that you do together as a clinically integrated network. Sorry, this may end early.
And are you
You're gonna have
aggregating
more
best
questions.
practices?
Yes,
That's what.
exactly. So I'll just keep going.
Yeah.
So therein lies the value of it, and why the FTC, why they would normally be suspicious of it. That also addresses the concern.
You may
Better patient outcome.
only do this if you are doing it for improvement of population health
Mhm.
and improvement of patient outcomes, and clinical outcomes, and decreasing the cost of care. That is, you must always have that in the forefront, because if you're starting to do it for other reasons, and that's
Mhm.
kind of percolating to the surface,
Right.
that's exactly when you're gonna be crossways with
Yeah.
the FTC. So these are the three component areas. So the first collection is there about delivering better value. So that's about cost. So lowering the cost but still getting great outcomes. The middle grouping is about your clinicians. So having a better experience for your clinicians. Again, you want to keep your workforce strong and robust. And then and the businesses that those represent. And then the last group is about patients and making sure they have a good experience and they have good outcomes. Those are kind of the three buckets, and those are the areas around which a clinically integrated network, or a CIN, can come together and work. So now, Kevin, this is exactly what you were talking about. These are just some examples of some of the work that's currently going on in EHN. And this is a left hand of the screen and a right hand of the screen. So on the left-hand side of the screen, one of the initiatives has been working towards generic prescribing, making sure that we're generically prescribing. So annual GDR comparison is generic dispensing rate. That's what that stands for. And we've been doing this for 2 years, so in 2018 and then continued into 2019. As a network, we already were really quite good at preferring generic prescribing, and as you can see demonstrated. That in the top section, the orange bar is small. So that's your brand name, and then the generics are bigger. But we still challenged ourselves to make it better, and so you'll see from 2018 to 19 it got even more. the way you see this, we see this lived out on a day-to-day basis is every quarter our providers get a generic prescribing report. So we handed out, just handed it out last week to all of our clinic providers, telling them how they're doing in their generic prescribing and where they have opportunities, where they chose brands where they really could have chosen a generic. So it is live and right in your face in reports, and those were handed out to all these 1,800 docs around the whole east side. Yeah, Kevin?
In the spirit of following the money.
Yep.
Okay, so we have all the different drug manufacturers, right, under the call them a brand. And the generics, who makes the generics?
Same company.
That's what I thought. Okay, so market share capture. I'm wondering if there are, without getting down into the weeds, there's probably different manufacturers of the drugs that are bigger in the generics than others, or have a broader reach of product mix that gets more volume.
Yes, but we don't tend to,
Yes, sure.
we as clinicians
Right.
don't tend to get involved
Right.
in that.
It's,
Those-
consumer cost is less, and
Yeah, yeah.
the quality, effectiveness of the drug is quantified, so it's equal.
Yes, there's a bioequivalent measure that's done.
I already phrased that, but yeah.
So you may ask, okay, that sounds awesome, that we're prescribing generics, why is this even up here? Why is this part of the clinically integrated network work? And it's because, remember, these are, a lot of the work of a clinically integrated network is about not only having the patient's outcomes better, but decreasing the cost of care. And the insurance companies are very interested in decreasing the cost of care. So the insurance companies are the beneficiaries of more generic prescribing. So now you're seeing this live. Insurance company, you are benefiting from us prescribing more generics. We would like some of that savings. Clinically integrated network, quality incentives. We helped you get more money, share it. That's what's the outcome of that.
Do you have a
It's the
trend
right
line
thing to
that-
do.
Do you have a trend line that goes backwards further?
Safe harbor, huh?
Just out of curiosity,
no.
issue, have you ever seen them go back to like 2010?
Not for this group,
Uh-huh.
because the EHN just stood itself up in 2017.
Okay.
It's brand new,
So
and
how
we just
fast
started
generics have
measuring
moved?
in 2018.
I mean, obviously, we're 90.
Yeah, so I don't
90%
have
market.
anything in there. On the right-hand side of the display is yet another project, and this was about pre-anesthesia testing. And what, as a group, we declared was there is far too much testing going on before somebody goes to surgery that is completely without any evidence-based medicine to support. And so again, you see the same concept. By streamlining it and saying, they're not streamlining, but really having it based on evidence and identifying the testing that needs to be done prior to the right surgeries, now you decrease the overall cost of care. Patients have better experiences. Patients are incurring less expense. And
so
the other thing that very, very often happens is you're going to go have, and I'm going to use one, you're going to have a cataract surgery. So that actually, as horrible as it sounds, it's really not that invasive. It's just right here. And they would send people to have their blood counts done, their livers checked, do your diabetes, and what's your kidney function. None of those things have anything to do with the eye. And you need an EKG while you're there, and maybe a chest x-ray. And in one of those tests, something was a little bit abnormal, totally unexpected, not that abnormal, but we should probably pursue it anyway. Now you got a CT scan because the chest x-ray was a little abnormal. Maybe we should send you for a stress test because you had a little ditzel on your EKG, and all you needed was cataract surgery. And you actually would be able to walk and feel better if you could actually see the sidewalk with your cataract out. So anyway, those are kinds of things that we were like stopping ourselves and so, somebody along the way said, oh, but one time I stumbled across somebody who had a real problem on those tests.
Is that a malpractice
Right.
statement?
It's
Precautionary?
not.
It's not?
No, it was generated probably in years gone by from a either defensive posture or absolute complete posture, or total habit, or anecdotal. I had an experience once. So again, just an example of if we can be more thoughtful, we spend less money, we have less negative outcomes, and people are actually harmed sometimes when you're chasing
Yeah.
an insight
Yeah.
into the answer for a test result that actually has no symptoms to go along with it. So, I'll keep going. We have 4 Medicare Advantage contracts. And so with those contracts, there are the 4 across the top: Humana, Premier, Aetna, and United. And so the Medicare Advantage program offers stars. They have a star rating system. So it's 0 through 5. And so this is how we perform. And so this is a great insight over on the left side into some of the quality measures that we're contributing to that are what we get incentive payments around. And so with each of these insurers, these payers, our performance translates to an amount of incentive dollars. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And then there were some things that in our contracting, again, contracting is 1,800 providers in 4 hospitals, so you actually can get a whole lot of leverage. So they were able to do some contracting, like they're allowing an annual wellness visit at least once a year. The win on that one is the usual contract says every 366 days?
Yep.
And if you're one day off of that, you don't get paid. So if it was 365 days since your last one, and that's a pain in the neck to manage. So now they got them to say once a year. In
Once a year,
2019, you get 1. In 2020, you get 1.
When you have it.
When you have it, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little crazy
That's
things
not
like
okay.
this. And then just some data. That's in as crazy as it sounds, and Jen actually would totally get this, but one of the things that we need in order to improve is data, and the hardest thing to get out of the payers is data. It just doesn't turn around. So all we have is our own data that we create, but you don't have much more data about your patients. So that was another big thing, was to get data out of them. So this is just an example of flow of funds. So see the top 2 bullet points, the one that's care coordination and the other is incentives. Those are those 2 varieties of payments. So one, the care coordination is you pay us ahead of time, give us a little money for every patient that we are overseeing for you, and just so that we can support doing all of the right things for them. So care coordination. So for us, our care coordination rules, we keep track of when somebody's due for something, and if they're delayed getting it done, we're on the phone calling them and prompting them to get in. It's time for your colonoscopy, it's time for your mammogram, it's time for your diabetes follow-up tests. And so that costs money, and so they give us a little money to do that with. And then the second one is incentives based on your quality performance, which is what we've been talking about already. So just a great example, in this last year, we earned, as a clinically integrated network, $807,000 in incentive payments from Cigna. Now that is the clinically integrated network, the 1,800 clinicians, so this is divided among them and 4 hospitals, so it's all coming to us. But, I mean, still, $630. We've gotten a check for $20,000 and a check for something in the high teens, I can't remember. Because they just started, all the payouts just started.
Wow.
So we're super proud of ourselves. And now this is just an insight into the number of patients that are represented across, that are part of BHN. And so you'll see the dramatic growth from 2018 to 2019. I'm just bringing you to the left side of the screen, the table there.
Wow.
And so you'll see that some big growth and adding on to almost almost 10,000. Sorry, you can't see the numbers in the bottom, from 34,000 to 57,000. But that was the growth just in 1 year. And a large part of that growth is the new Microsoft Health Connect plan. That is a direct-to-employer plan, meaning Microsoft pays EHN. It's through Primera, but that's just to do all the moving of the paper around. But Microsoft has a contract directly with EHN to be the provider of healthcare services for all of the Microsoft employees participating in the Microsoft Connect plan. So when a Microsoft employee comes on board, a new hire, and any employee at open hire, but a Microsoft employee is offered 3 plans right now. One of them is a group health plan. One of them is an HRA plan where they kind of pay, they're given money and they pay for it themselves. And the other is, this one is Health Connect. So this is really tremendous, and this is Microsoft's first and only direct with provider like in the country, and so more are going to crop up. It's getting lots and lots of attention. So you see on the right-hand side is just the Health Connect membership, and it just went live in 2019. That's when it went live. So January 1, and you see over the course of just the year, it went from a little over 1,000 to over 4,000 participants, and I think it's already almost at 5,000.
The only thing that dropped was Aetna PPO. From
Correct.
18.
Yeah, you'll see
The
ups
rest
and
went
downs.
up, yeah.
Everybody else goes up.
The rest.
Yeah.
So there's a win for the employer,
Correct.
and there's a corresponding win for the patient.
Yes, there is.
For the hospital.
And the insurance company.
Yeah.
Here's an example of one of the wins. So this is a product that's only available to Microsoft Connect. They are able to put an app on their phone or their desktop. It's called the Primera Pulse. And they're able to say, I want to see a provider. I have a whatever that I haven't seen about. And so I want to see an ophthalmologist. I want to see a primary care provider. And they key that in because what this app does is the first displays are EHN docs.
They can actually schedule an appointment.
Yeah.
They can use it
It's kind of like
to initiate an appointment being scheduled. They can do it off of here. So they can't take it all the way through to making an appointment, but they can initiate it, and then a person picks it up, and kind of a concierge service helps them to set it, make the schedule. So this is where the direct to employer is huge, because you can do things. The employer can say, here's the profile of our employees. This is where I want to put some priority in our system. I have depending on your that industry or that employer, we need to work on more physical activity. We've got an aging population. We need to work on some different things. And so they love the ability to be in control and to construct a lot of the payment plan. If I have much more. And it's just moving forward into 2020. So the direct to employer work, so it's been set up really quite well with Microsoft, and now it's starting to market it to other small businesses. So companies of 500 to 1,000 employees is really who they're marketing right now. And get in there. Medicare annual wellness visits right in the center of the page. It's one of the things that we're really working on. One of the things we here have had a concerted effort in 2019 to really raise our Medicare annual wellness visit rates, and we're making great inroads. We've got some new programs in there. So I've gone fast, and that's it.
All right. Any other questions? That's great. If you have information.
You're welcome. I do have for you, I didn't want to put this in your hands so that I don't want you to get distracted and not listen to me.
Wonderful. I
You
was
can
gonna
take that
make,
home with you.
take pictures and all that. You have any other questions? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.
Just like that.
Just like that.